Christians study history, and specifically the history of Jesus, not because they want to fictionalize that history, but because we think that God has been revealed in history. So we want to know what's been revealed. I want to talk about that today. Hi, I'm Warren, the rector here at St. Columba's. Glad you could join me for my message of the day. Talking about whether Jesus existed, I think some people, those who doubt that he existed, think that Christians play with history to try and make a fiction, make it up as they go along, rather than to study history to be guided by the historical Jesus. See, Christians think that Jesus is the human face of God. So what he says and what he does actually reveals God to us. So it is absolutely crucial to us as Christians to know what Jesus said, what he did, who he was, because we think that that's actually revealing God to us. So we coordinate our understanding of God to who Jesus is. So we want to know who Jesus is. So we don't have a pre-existing notion of God and then try and fit Jesus into that and make it up as we go along. It's the other way around. We want to know who Jesus was, what he said, what he did historically, because that's God speaking to us. We don't want the fiction. We want the truth. So this is why so much time and energy has been put into the historical study of Jesus. So let's say in the last 100 years, intense study to try and understand more about Jesus. There's been waves of different understandings, new insights, often contradicting each other or at odds with each other, sorting out who this Jesus was. All the kind of historical research you'd find in any kind of university looking at some other historical figure. You get all of that with the Jesus studies. We want to understand his context, so we study more than just Jesus, because it's important to know how he was he was a child of his age, yes, but also how was he unique, different from those people of his age. Of course, within the church, there's always been those who have been uncomfortable with the historical Jesus. The historical Jesus, the revelation of God, that's what Christians think, sometimes doesn't fit with what we think God should be like, should say, should do. And that's been troubling. So Christians have then tried to change things. So for instance, people have cut out the bits from the Gospels that troubled them. Had a slimmed down version of the Gospels, so to speak, to cut out those bits of Jesus that they didn't like. Or else sometimes people put together some kind of theological sleight of hand so that the troubling historical Jesus need not be the final or the ultimate revelation of God. It gives us a good idea, but not the final revelation of God. See, again, the troubling historical Jesus was in some way domesticated by making him less than the revelation of God. Sort of one step back from revelation, so to speak, leaving God still a shadowy figure behind Jesus, rather than Jesus being being God in the flesh. But Christianity has hung on to Jesus as the revelation of God, despite all the difficulties and the discomfort that might mean for many of us at times. Christianity's hung on to him, and it always will, always has, always will hold on to Jesus as the one to follow. He's the revelation of God. For Christians, there is no other further, more complete revelation to come. And whatever we think God should be like, or say, or do, if it isn't compatible with Jesus, then Christians are very suspicious. And so, going back to the historical Jesus, if you think about what I've just said, the historical study of the man Jesus becomes very important to Christians. Such studies also become a battleground for those who disagree about important things in the Christian church. Again, this highlights why the historical study of Jesus is not fiction, but rigorous historical study following the usual patterns of historical study and research. And this also explains why, when people in the church are looking to persuade others to a particular point of view on a matter, Jesus is always part of the equation. Somewhere, somehow, to a greater or lesser extent, depending on the topic, Jesus, who he was, what he said, and what he did, is always there. And that's why the study of the historical Jesus is so important to us. Thanks for joining me. Bye-bye.